Welcome to this Microsoft Visio video lecture. The topics for this lecture are connecting shapes using the connector tool, snap and glue, what is it and what does it mean, and setting up for printing, including repeating headers and footers. Once you have your shapes on the page in the layout that you think is the right one for you, you're ready to connect these. We're going to do so with the connector tool. So on the home ribbon, I go to the tools group, I select connector, and this becomes my connector tool. When I go over my page, my pointer tool used to show a white arrow. Now I see the black arrow with black crosshairs and a small line. This is because I'm on the connector tool. Now when I go over a shape, instead of highlighting it showing the sizing handles and the rotate handle, I see a green border and I see the 4 black connection points of this particular shape. Shapes don't have the same number of connection points. These do have because they're all the same vacancy belt shape. When I hover over one of those black dots, it turns green. This means that I'm ready to click and drag to one of the shapes I wish to connect to. In this case, I want to connect my vice president shapes to the CEO. Now I went from the CEO to the first one. The next one I might try to do the same thing, but often what happens is when you hover over that connection point, you end up getting the move endpoint option. So it's easier to go to the subordinate position and then attach, because this is one position attaching to a location where multiple positions attach. So I'm going to make sure that all 3 of them have a full connection point. When I have one of those selected as my active point, you can see that the ends of each of them are green. They have green dots over them. This means that they have been snapped and glued. Snapping and gluing lines is good. That means that if I were to move a single subordinate shape, the line stays attached. Or if I grab hold of the shape that the 3 are attached to, because there are subordinate positions there, and I move it, it moves all of the subordinate shapes. These also, by default, in this basic install, are lines with arrows. Now, org charts don't usually have lines with arrows, so I want to take those off. So I'm going to select the first one, hold down the control key, select the next one, and go on. Now I can go to, in the shape style, the line, push on the drop down for further menus. So in that shape style group, select the line option. This is after lassoing my 3 lines together, and I'm going to select the line that has no arrows. The other thing I don't like about this is that my line is sitting closer to my subordinate shapes and further away from my CEO position. I can change that. You'll notice I've changed back to the pointer tool here by virtue of what I was doing by selecting a line and hovering over the little green dot, and I can move it up. This is something that's easier to do when you scroll in. It's easier to line things up. So I've got the first line. Here I'm getting the second line. And now I'm going to get the third line. And this puts things closer. You'll notice that I'm having trouble lining those up, so I scroll in. And now I can go back and try again. If it's not working, I can pick the others and try putting those because I didn't get right on a line, and so on. So you can adjust your lines in that fashion to make sure that everything is lining up. I would then go down and add lines to each of these other positions. You'll notice I always attach each line from the subordinate box all the way to the supervisory box. This gives a full line so that when you need to move positions on an org chart, or perhaps somebody gets laid off, the position is deleted, you don't lose your lines and need to redo those. So again, back to the connector tool. Here I'm going to the left side of the subordinate box and then connecting up to the supervisory position. I'm going to do all three of these, again, making sure they are snapped and glued to each of the ends so that they will move in concert. And it comes up, there we go. I'll scroll out a little bit so I can do the others, but you can see what I'm doing here. It's fairly easy to connect them. I then simply switch back to pointer tool. I can then lasso all of them together. I'm using the select one, hold the control key and get all of them, and then remove the arrows. And I will do that on all of these so that I have a fully completed org chart. You will notice on these lines over here, I have one that the arrow's going the opposite direction. If I in fact wanted arrows, I could, and I wanted them to all go in the same direction, I could just select a different arrow end. So you can see when you hover over things what happens. In this case, I really do want all of them to have no arrows. So I'll simply remove those. Next, let's switch back to page view, page fit to window, and you can get a better idea of how this is going to look when printed. But what about headers and footers? Where should I put the company name? Often your company org charts are approved by a board of trustees or by the CEO or somebody, and you want to have a approved on date. But you also like to know when they were printed. Sometimes you want to have an approved by date and then you put this in a PDF format on your website, but you may also want to have it available with a printed on date so that you can have some idea of when somebody's opening things up and printing them if you're giving them the actual Visio file to work with. So we're going to go to File, Print, because this is how we get to the repeating headers and footers. So click on Edit Header and Footer. Now, unlike most Microsoft products, this looks a little different. The header and footer in the same dialog box. They still have left, center, right for each, but the function buttons are not showing here. We have to click the arrow, and here we go. We have function buttons. To get the tab page, so the page number name, if we gave it a name, we have to use the page name function. To get a approved on date, let's go ahead and let's put in here a company name. So XYQ Corporation. Let's put here in the left, let's go ahead and put an approved on date, and we're going to type this in. Let's say this was approved on December 4th of 2017. In the center of our footer, let's put the page name so we know which one of the tabs we've printed. And then here in the right, let's put a printed on date. And we're going to use the current date short, and you'll notice I need to put a blank space between the on and the function, and then in between the function and the next function. So one blank space, and I'll put the current time. If you're doing multiple versions because you're printing things out, maybe you're trying to build a new organizational setup or tweak it, you may want to actually do the printed on date and time to keep track of which version it was. It's easier than changing, say, the name of the tab to the version number each time if you're working in the same page. And then it's all ready to print. It gives you a full look at how is it going to look when I print. If you look at page 2 of my figure 2 in my file, it's a blank drawing. There is no drawing, but It puts that repeating header and footer exactly the same, just as it does with multiple pages in Word. If you have any questions, please consult your instructor.